There's no reason to lose heart. The words of Myanmar's pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi addressing a large crowd a day after she was released from 7 years under house arrest. Will Myanmar's opposition come together under her leadership, or has she turned into an icon of symbolic value with limited political power? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. Welcome to the programme. Aung San Suu Kyi has come to embody the struggle for democracy in Myanmar. A Nobel Peace Laureate who's refused to leave her country, keeping the plight of its people on the international agenda. She's been detained by the junta for much of the past 2 decades. Her release on Saturday greeted with emotional scenes. This report from Al Jazeera's man in Yangon, who we're not naming for his own safety.
The day after the release of Aung San Suu Kyi, thousands of people came onto the streets of Yangon. Myanmar's pro-democracy campaigner may be a free woman now, but her movements were restricted by her supporters, who flocked to the headquarters of her party, the National League for Democracy. With her house arrest at an end, she came here to begin planning her political future and to address those who had stuck by her throughout her detention. Inside, Aung San Suu Kyi spoke about her unconditional release and turned her attention to how she can help her country as it makes the transition to a democracy.
So all I can say is that I'll try to achieve it as quickly as possible, but how soon I'm able to achieve democracy depends very much on how much support the people will give us.
Earlier in the day, the transformation at her house continued, with the fences designed to keep her in and others out being removed. She was able to leave her home as a free woman for the first time in 7 years, after being released by the country's military rulers on Saturday afternoon. It was her first chance to see how the nation has stagnated economically, thanks in part to international sanctions which she campaigned for. Now she's willing to help lift them because she says the country needs help. Her release came a week after Myanmar's first election in 20 years. Suu Kyi was banned from standing, while the NLD has been dissolved as a political party after boycotting the poll. Some say she and the NLD missed an opportunity, but she said she has no regrets.
I would define it as something that is in the hearts and minds of the people. I didn't found the National League for Democracy to be a party per se. I found it as a movement for democracy, as an organization for achieving democracy for Burma. And as long as the people want democracy in Burma, this organization, whether those who are in authority claim that it is legal or illegal, this organization will continue to exist.
Aung San Suu Kyi is free once again, leaving her supporters with hope that she can fulfill her promise of delivering true democracy. Al Jazeera, Yangon, Myanmar.
Right, well, joining us now to discuss this are our guests who all know the country very well. In Bangkok, we have regional expert on Southeast Asian issues, Larry Jago. In Kuala Lumpur, Nyo Myint, the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Aung San Suu Kyi's political party, the National League for Democracy. And from London, we have the author Justin Wintle, who wrote the book Perfect Hostage, all about Aung San Suu Kyi. Mr. Nyo, let's start with you. You know her well, although I believe you haven't met for over 20 years now. What's your reaction to the events of the last 48 hours?
Yeah, I think this is a very tremendous moment for not only for our political activists, but also the rest of the people of Burma, all the ethnic nationalities and Burman alike. See the hope that she could, do something for our future, our country future. But she really needs our support and other ethnic and democratic and all together, united together, and then to fight for that democratization and human rights security in Burma.
Well, as soon as she was released, she came out and spoke to people. She addressed thousands of supporters who'd gathered at the headquarters of her political party, calling for face-to-face talks with the junta's leaders. She said, I believe in human rights and I believe in the rule of law. I will always fight for these things. I want to work with all democratic forces and I need the support of the people. She went on, I am for national reconciliation. I am for dialogue. Whatever authority I have, I'll use it to that end. Larry Jago, you have followed this very closely for many years. Does that sound like a tone of compromise from her?
No, I don't think it is a compromise. She's stuck very carefully to her principles. She wants dialogue and national reconciliation. She's not prepared to force her views on people, but she's also not going to be cowed by the junta. I think she's taken a very measured approach and she's saying that what we need is national unity. And I think she's handing out an olive branch not only to the military, but also to those members of the pro-democracy movement that decided that they would compete in the elections, even though the National League for Democracy called for a boycott. And more importantly, she's offering an olive branch to the ethnic minorities. And by and large, she is the only one who can unite Burma. The military have proved they cannot do that, and that's what everyone is now expecting.
Justin Wintle, you wrote a book about Aung San Suu Kyi. Do you agree with that? Or do you think we're going to see more confrontational scenes as we saw in the past, a mass protest down the line?
Well, I don't think those two things are necessarily contradictory. I agree with what Larry Jagan has just been saying, of course. I think that Aung San Suu Kyi has a lot of very difficult challenges ahead of her. She needs to try and persuade the junta that they haven't over-risked by setting her free. And it seems to be a bit of window dressing, another piece of window dressing on that part. But if she's very astute, she will build a bridge with them and perhaps be able to talk, if not to Senior General Than Shwe, at least to one or two of his colleagues. One thing I feel quite important, really, is that there's a lot of talk at the moment about investigating electoral fraud, electoral malpractice, etc. I think it would be wiser to treat the election for all its faults as done and dusted, because the regime aren't going to move on that. Set that to one side, swallow your pride on that, and that would be a gesture to the regime which would say to them, maybe this person is not so dangerous for us, and try and move things on that way.
Nyo Myint, time for her to swallow her pride. Do you agree?
You know, like, I don't think that, you know, she's going to be too principled, or, you know, she's going to be too rigid for that, because, you know, then she already learned that the past 20 years, then, you know, the past 20 years, then ethnic and other Democrats are alike, you know, we seems to be united, but not really. But this time she called the unity, and then she called the other, you know, needs of the country, how we united together and to fight. At the same time, you know, what the Justin said that a while ago, that, you know, this is a very difficult moment, that how how she's got a leverage to face the regime. Of course, I don't really see that any positive sign from the Senior General Than Shwe, but we need a people power. When you look at it in the Philippines in 1986, that's a people power just after the election. So Burma could happen anytime.
Larry Jagan, talk of maybe her doing it differently this time. Do you think she made a mistake last time with the way she handled things? And we've had this twice before, her being released and then being arrested again.
Well, I think there was always a danger that if she challenged the regime too much, she was going to be rearrested. I think she knew that even after the first time she was released in 1995. I think she tried in 2002 to be conciliatory. There were, after all, talks between Aung San Suu Kyi and the military intelligence chief, Kin Yunt, at the time, that led up to her arrest. She thought they had made some agreements, but it proved that the top general, Than Shwe, was not prepared to abide by them, and that forced her into a position of being a little more proactive. I think she's probably a little more careful now. It's 7.5 years since she was arrested, and I think she's had a lot of time to think. I think she understands that the elections are a big block to the way forward. But I think she's decided to sidestep them for the moment and talk about what kinds of things can we agree on. Hints that maybe she'd be prepared to compromise on the issue of sanctions. And I think the key thing that she has said today is that she wants to meet Than Shwe, or at least representatives of him, over a table to discuss and find out where they can agree. I think that would be a very sensible way forward. It is not being deliberately provocative, and she's always said that actually a dialogue, a national dialogue, was important, not to find out a winner, but to find causes where both the military and the opposition and the ethnic groups can work together so that the people of Burma benefit. Everybody benefits.
Yes, Justin Wintle, I want to ask you about the way this has been portrayed in the media in recent years, over the last 20 years or so. It has all been personalised around the lady, as she's known in Burma. Do you think that's helpful or unhelpful?
I think you're absolutely right in what you say. I mean, look, she is a terrific combination of the small, frail, elegant, delicate, beautiful woman who's got this lion heart inside, and for media, particularly Western media, that is a knockout. And so it's understandable that through laziness as much as anything else, the Western media have always focused on her, and she's been the prism through which the whole of Burma is regularly seen. Now, what that does is, and that's not a bad thing given what her values are, but it distorts the picture. People often talk about the regime and the people in Burma as though the people were one and indivisible. Well, they're not. Although Suu Kyi obviously has terrific following in Burma, there are those amongst the ethnics, activists and insurgents as well, who are far more interested in autonomy for their own people. Again, you've got a class, a military class of officers particularly, who are quite satisfied by the way things are going, and there are some people in trade who know which side their bread is buttered on, or whether the rice is boiled or fried, as they say that. I'd just like to go back to the business about sanctions. I mean, because the West has imposed sanctions, it's sought to isolate the regime, and it's isolated the country as well, but it's also isolated the West in a sense. What is remarkable at the moment is that there is an opportunity that we can actually help on the sanctions front. It's quite clear that Suu Kyi is having a major rethink about sanctions. We should be having a major rethink, because it hasn't helped. They haven't achieved their ends. It's kept Burma impoverished, which affects a lot of people. If we could, that is America, EU and UK, say, okay guys, we're going to scrap sanctions in order to move things forward, and she was tied in with that process, that might create a circumstance in which there would be dialogue between her, not necessarily with Than Shwe, who's old and isn't going to be around much longer, but hopefully there'll be some other emergent military leader with perhaps a wider intelligence.
Nyo Myint, let me put that point to you. I mean, there is disagreement even within your party, isn't there, on this issue?
You mean sanctions?
Yes.
You know, sanction. Actually, we didn't. They call for the sanction. Of course, in 1988, at that time, that the regime very, brutality, and then we have no weapon to resist that the regime brutality. At that time, of course, we did it. But nowadays, then, we really wanted to look at it, that the sanctions is really affecting the people or really affecting the government. Because, we are also, my personal feeling is that the regime is that, the regime is trying to scapegoat the sanction as that the best weapon to protect their failed state, and then the failed, the economic failure and other social failure, etc. In that case, that she's willing to work with the sanctions and how she could, assist the regime. That's why the last year she met with the Western diplomats at her in Rangoon, and then to listen. She also liked to listen that what the other, even the Western sanction, the other ASEAN country like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and then of course, China and in India. So, she also needs to meet with those, neighboring countries, the leaders or the representative, and then how people, the neighboring, the interest, and then how the Western interest. She's not that, a person to oppose the sanction. She's willing to work for the people because today she saw that how people are suffering. So if sanction lifted and the next day all the foreign direct investment would be coming in, we're really glad that we appreciate it. But the problem is that the policy matter, economic policy matter is that major hurdle for the foreign direct investment.
Larry Jagan, the lady, and that's how she's known in Burma, is clearly revered. We've seen those pictures in recent hours and in the last 48 hours. But how relevant is she still? And has the world moved on a little since she's been under house arrest?
Well, undoubtedly the world has moved on since she's been under house arrest, and I think that's one of the reasons why she's prepared to discuss the issue of sanctions. She sees, I think, that this is divisive rather than cohesive, and it's divided Asia and the West, and given that Asia are neighbours of Burma, and if she ever took over power in Burma, she would have to deal with these neighbours, and she would not want to be on the other side and in the enemy camp. So she sees that there needs to be a way in which she can overcome this. I think that in terms of her relevance, it's quite clear, given the pictures that we've been getting from Rangoon, perhaps as many as 40,000 people out on the streets of Rangoon today for supporting her. When I was there in 2002, when she was released the last time, there was far less than that. There was only a couple of thousand. I think that the isolation that she's been under has actually increased her position. I think the fact that the National League for Democracy, under her leadership, took a position to boycott the elections and said they were going to be unfree and unfair, when many people were suggesting, well, look, give them a chance. They were proved right because the military regime has manipulated those elections in a way that I don't think anyone could have anticipated.
Well, I'd like to examine the motives of that military regime now. And if I can ask Justin Wintle, why have they decided to release her now? Why they decided to have a new constitution, new elections? Is this a military junta running out of steam, or do they feel that they're in a very strong, confident position?
It's certainly not a regime which is running out of steam. If you look at all the efforts they've made over the last few years to shore up their power, the new constitution and these elections. I mean, what we've got to recall is these elections were not just to a National Assembly. They were in all, they were to 16 elections. 16 assemblies, one in each of the provincial states, as they're called in Burma, as well as a bicameral two-house National Assembly. So I don't think that the regime is stuck for answers. I don't think it is running out of steam at all. Why they released Suu Kyi is a bit of a conundrum, really. I mean, on the one hand, these are army men who have kept her in confinement. They issued an order, and it is the habit of disciplined military soldiers to follow orders through, and the house arrest expired on Saturday, yesterday, so in a way it's natural that it should have come to an end. On the other hand, they obviously had the option of extending house arrest, as they've done many times before. They may be doing this as, as a sop, not so much to the West or the so-called international community, as to the more immediate neighbours, the component states of ASEAN, the association, the Association of South Asian Nations.
Nyo Myint, sorry, Justin. Nyo Myint, what's your... okay, quickly, yep.
What I'd like to do is just to continue with this thing. There may have been some arm twisting, perhaps by one or two of the ASEAN states, which we don't know about. The problem is the generals never explain their actions. They never explain why they do what they do.
Okay, Nyo Myint, what's your take on that? Why has she been let out now?
That's going to be a few things that my opinion. The number one is that they wanted to cover up the sham election on November 7. So when she was free on Saturday, and then people thought that, okay, then people forget about the elections and international, embrace the regime that she was finally free, or that's a special award or Christmas present for the international community. And then the second thing is that within the military, I don't think the senior Than Shwe is very comfortable with that the generals who forced to retire, and then they are quite a bit unhappy right now. So then the third one is that the ceasefire groups and ethnic nationality armed forces, they are right now, that's in the very high tension between the ethnic and then the Burmese army at that point. So then they really need to ceasefire with that the Aung San Suu Kyi and NLD. So that's why they were supposed to free her, but they just wanted to get a credit on that part.
Gentlemen, the difficult part comes now, because I'm going to ask you to look in your crystal balls. Larry Jagan, how do you see the coming days, weeks and months playing out, and what are the key landmarks coming up?
Well, I think the next few days are going to be critical. To what extent is Aung San Suu Kyi going to keep the kind of pattern that she's already set, one of conciliation, one of offer of talks and national reconciliation? I think one has to remember that one of the reasons that she's been released is that there are probably differences within the military regime. They're not as convinced or as monolithic as one would imagine, and some of the younger officers who are now regional commanders and senior officers are not entirely happy with the way in which the election was run and with the way in which Than Shwe has been running the military. So they may well be prepared to offer an olive branch to Aung San Suu Kyi. The big problem is, how is Than Shwe going to act? She's tried this in the past, and what we found is that he's ignored it. My fear is that this time, because of the farce of the elections, because of the popular support of Aung San Suu Kyi, if Than Shwe and the military regime do not respond to her conciliatory offers, it's going to lead to demonstrations in the streets, and I fear that actually it may well end in bloodshed. And I know that this is something that Aung San Suu Kyi would not want. When I last spoke to her, she said, I cannot have the blood on my conscience. I cannot allow people to be killed in the same way that they were in 1988.
Nyo Myint, can I ask you the same question? How do you see things playing out? Do you fear there'll be bloodshed, or are you confident about the future of your country?
It's a very quite difficult time for us to say that from the outside of Burma, because right now the momentum is very high. People, because we know that I'm a Burmese, and I know that the Burmese, the mentality, and then people are right now very frustrated. Their frustration needs some outlet. So that's why, as Larry said that a while ago, that in 40,000 today they came to see her. It's quite a bit tremendous, and then the Burmese people, the emotional, and then also frustration, economic situation, and then the whole people has been treated a really bad situation, and then that point. So people wanted to get out from this situation. People really need to change. So
Thank you, then.
But I hopefully that, yeah.
Thanks to our guests in Bangkok, Larry Jagan, in Kuala Lumpur, Nyo Myint, and in London, Justin Wintle. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'll read them all before we see you in 24 hours' time. Bye-bye for now.